Okay, let's just take a second to look at the calendar today.
Yeah.
It is Sunday, February 22, 2026.
Right.
And if you are listening to this right now, you know exactly what the atmosphere out there feels like.
Oh, absolutely.
It is, electric, tense, probably a little bit of both.
I'd say it's completely a pivot point.
Right.
We are basically sitting on a razor's edge in Nepali politics right now.
Exactly. We are watching this massive transition. It started as this, local disruption, a guy in black glasses fixing potholes and managing waste in Kathmandu.
Yeah, at the local level stuff.
Right. But now it has morphed into a full-blown national revolution. And the stakes here, they really couldn't be higher for the country.
No, they really couldn't.
Yeah.
Because we aren't just talking about, who gets to sit in the prime minister's chair at Bala Water.
Right.
We're talking about a fundamental structural battle. It is essentially this Gen Z revolution crashing headfirst into the old guard.
The same old guard that has held power for, 3 decades?
Easily 3 decades.
Yeah. And right at the center of this massive storm is one man, Balen Shah.
Or, as everyone knows him, Balen, the disruptor.
The disruptor, yeah. Formerly the independent mayor of Kathmandu, the guy who basically made the word mayor sound like a rock star job title.
He really did.
The guy who famously insisted that being independent is the only way forward. And yet here we are in 2026, and he is the prime ministerial candidate for the Rastriya Swatantra Party, the RSP.
Which is just a massive, massive shift in his entire political identity.
It's huge. And to understand how we got here, we've got to really dig into the source material we brought to the table today.
Because we aren't just, speculating on rumors here.
Exactly. We have the actual text. It's called the 2026 Manifesto for Balen Shah. And let me tell you, it is fascinating reading.
It really isn't your typical dry, dusty political pamphlet.
Not at all. It's actually structured as this high-stakes interview. So it's basically 100 questions firmly rooted in the harsh reality of 2026, paired with Balen's very specific, very technocratic answers.
And the juicy part, the part that really stands out, is the detailed 100-day action plan for a potential Balen-led government.
Right. It's essentially a blueprint. It lays out exactly how a social media mayor plans to actually run an entire country.
So our mission for this deep dive today is to really unpack that blueprint. We want to see what's inside.
We need to figure out if this radical 100-day plan is actually feasible or if it's just, really good content for the algorithm.
And of course, we absolutely have to talk about the total David versus Goliath battle happening right now in District Jhapa 5.
Oh, the decapitation strike.
I love that term so much.
It's such a heavy phrase. We are definitely going to get deep into that. But first, I think we need to start with the elephant in the room.
The sellout question.
Yeah, the sellout question. Because this is the very first thing that critics bring up. Balen built his entire brand on being an independent.
He was the lone wolf.
Right. He was the guy who constantly said he didn't need a traditional party structure. He was above it. And now he's officially wearing the RSP bell symbol.
He is.
Yeah.
And if you look at the manifesto, the very first section actually tackles this head on. The question presented to him is blunt. It just says, "You are the ultimate independent icon. Why join the RSP?"
I appreciate that they didn't shy away from it.
Yeah, and his answer is incredibly revealing about his evolution from a city mayor to a national leader. He uses this distinct analogy of building a house.
Okay, let's hear it.
He says, and I'm quoting the idea here, you cannot build a foundation while trying to put on a roof.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What exactly does he mean by that in this context?
Well, he's basically saying that launching a brand new party from scratch in a massive election year that's trying to build the foundation, the infrastructure, right?
Right.
Doing that while simultaneously trying to campaign to run a national government, which is the roof,
Right.
is just structurally impossible.
So you can't lay the concrete and shingle the roof on the exact same day.
Exactly. The manifesto points out his realization that to change a single municipality, you can totally be a lone wolf. You could just use your executive authority as mayor. But to change an entire country, you absolutely need a machine.
A machine.
Yeah, you need a structural framework, a national engine that runs on its own. He specifically says in the text, independent wins work for mayors, but changing a country requires a structural framework.
So his argument is basically that joining the RSP wasn't about surrendering his independence, but rather about acquiring an engine to drive his vision.
That is exactly the pitch. The source material claims they merge their visions. The RSP already has the organization, the cadres, the bell symbol which everyone recognizes, and crucially, that massive wave of youth energy.
So he didn't want to waste 5 years building a party apparatus when he could just slide right into the driver's seat of an existing one.
Right. But obviously that brings us to the other major figure in this whole equation.
Rabi Lamichhane.
The organizer, as the text refers to him.
Yeah, the dynamic there is, well, it's complicated, isn't it? I mean, Rabi has certainly had his fair share of headlines over the years.
Oh, absolutely.
The legal battles, the cooperative issues, all that baggage. And the source material actually addresses this directly, which I found surprising.
It does. And Balen's stance on this in the manifesto is very, very technocratic. He entirely removes the emotion from it.
How so?
Well, he points out that the courts have cleared Rabi, but more interestingly, he completely shifts the focus. The text quotes him basically saying, "My focus isn't on individual pasts, it's on the systemic illegality that has actively worked to keep Nepal poor."
That is a classic political pivot right there. Don't look at the person's history, look at the broken system.
Precisely. And to make this alliance work, the manifesto defines a very strict, very clear division of labor.
Okay, what does that look like?
So Rabi Lamichhane is designated as the organizer. He is the one handling the party machine, managing the ground cadres, doing the heavy lifting of the ground game.
Makes sense.
And Balen Shah is positioned as the visionary. He is strictly handling the structural vision and the actual governance strategy.
So essentially, Rabi builds at the car and makes sure it has gas, and Balen is the one steering the wheel.
In a sense, yes. And it's not just the two of them. The manifesto heavily emphasizes this robust support team they've built.
Right? They mention some big names.
They do. They mention bringing in established experts like Swarnam Weigel and DP Ariel. So the framing here is really an attempt to present this as a highly competent, technocratic cabinet in waiting, rather than just a two-man populist show.
It's just so interesting to read this because Balen talks at length in the source about actively avoiding personality-driven cults.
Which is highly ironic.
Very ironic, because he has arguably the largest personality cult in the entire country right now.
That is the ultimate paradox of modern populism right now. But I think we have to look at his speech in Janakpur, which is referenced quite heavily in this segment of the source.
Oh, right. Let's talk about Janakpur.
In that speech, he explicitly asked the crowd for votes based purely on merit, and explicitly not on identity.
Merit over identity. I mean, that is an absolute massive ask in the context of Nepali politics.
It might be the biggest ask possible, because Nepal has been deeply, deeply entrenched in identity politics for decades. Everything revolves around caste, region, ethnicity.
Right.
And here's Balen going directly to Janakpur, which is really the political heart of the Mahesh, and he's telling them, do not vote for me because of who I am or what region my ancestors are from. Vote for me because I have an actual structural plan.
Do you think the country is actually ready for that? For post-identity politics?
Well, that's the ultimate gamble of this election. The source text strongly suggests that Balen believes this new Gen Z wave has effectively washed away a lot of those old ethnic and regional barriers.
Because they're looking at different metrics.
Exactly. He believes the youth care infinitely more about job creation and digital access than they do about traditional ethnic voting blocks.
Right.
But, whether that theoretical belief actually holds up inside the privacy of a voting booth, that remains the biggest question.
Well, speaking of massive gambles, I think we need to pivot to segment 2. Let's talk about the battle for Jhapa 5.
Okay, yeah. It's quite literally the boldest political maneuver I think I've seen in recent history.
Just to set the scene for you listening, Balen is incredibly popular in Kathmandu.
Insanely popular.
He easily could have run in a safe seat here in the valley. He would have won in an absolute landslide.
He could have barely campaigned at all and still comfortably won a seat in Kathmandu.
Exactly. But instead of taking the easy road, he packs his bags and he heads all the way to Jhapa 5.
The fortress.
The home district of KP Sharma Oli, the absolute titan of the old guard. A man who has, for better or worse, largely defined Nepali politics for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
So the obvious question is why? Why risk everything on that specific seat?
Because, as Balen is quoted saying in the manifesto, the head of the snake must be addressed where it lives.
Man, that is quite a line.
It is a deliberate, strategic decapitation strike. Balen's logic here, as laid out in the text, is incredibly cold and calculated.
Break it down for me.
He essentially argues that for 35 years, KP Oli has been this towering, massive figure on the national stage. But what has he actually delivered on the ground to his own immediate neighbors?
Right, the local impact.
Exactly. In the manifesto, Balen points directly to the Friendship Industrial Park over there, noting that it's still just a blueprint on a piece of paper.
Ah.
He points to massive stadiums that sit completely empty.
So he's not attacking Oli on high-level national ideology. He's attacking the legacy right at its physical root.
Precisely. The core argument being presented to the voters in Jhapa is, if a leader cannot deliver basic development to his own literal neighbors after 3 decades in power, he has zero right to ask to lead the entire nation again.
It's a really powerful message.
It really is. It attempts to strip away that whole grandfather of the nation aura that Oli relies on, and it reduces him down to just a non-performing local representative.
And reading through the sources, the contrast in their actual campaign styles on the ground is just wild.
It's night and day.
You have Oli, who is totally used to these massive, highly produced rallies. He flies in on helicopters. He gives these sweeping speeches about national sovereignty.
And then on the flip side, you have Balen literally walking door to door, sweating in the rural agricultural areas like Damak and Garadaha.
It really is framed as grandfather versus grandson.
Completely. And we have to acknowledge the intense psychological warfare aspect of this strategy.
Right, because by just choosing to run in Jhapa 5, Balen has effectively forced Oli to physically stay in Jhapa.
That's the brilliant part of the maneuver.
Right. Oli is the absolute face of the UML party. In a normal election year, he needs to be constantly touring the country, rallying the base nationwide, headlining every major event.
But because this young upstart is suddenly threatening his own incredibly safe home seat, Oli is functionally confined to Jhapa just to defend his own fortress.
Balen basically grounded the opposition's biggest jet.
He pinned him down entirely. And the source points out that even if Balen ultimately loses this seat, which is highly possible, right?
Yeah.
Jhapa is historically a massive UML stronghold.
Sure.
Even if he loses, Balen has already successfully disrupted the national campaign momentum of the old guard just by forcing them to play defense.
But Bully isn't just taking this lying down. The source notes that he's been hitting back hard, specifically calling Balen imported.
Yes, the classic outsider allegation. It's a very standard political tactic. The whole, he's a city boy from Kathmandu, he doesn't know our rural problems, he's a tourist.
Right. And how does Balen rebut that in the manifesto?
It's a very sharp rebuttal. He first addresses it structurally. He says, in a federal republic, no Nepali citizen is a foreigner anywhere in Nepal.
Which is legally true.
Right. But then he politically flips the outsider tag completely on its head. He claims that he is outside the circle of corruption, and he argues that that is the only type of outsider status that voters should actually care about.
I'm not an outsider to Jhapa. I'm an outsider to the corruption. That is just really good political copywriting.
It definitely resonates with the current mood. People are utterly exhausted by the insiders. Being an insider is toxic right now. So embracing the outsider label is actually a huge asset in 2026.
Okay, so we've covered the political maneuvering and the theater of it all, but let's actually look at the track record he's running on. Segment 3 of the source material focuses heavily on what they call the Bulldozer legacy.
Right, because remember, Balen officially resigned as mayor on January 18th, 2026, specifically so he could run for this PM seat. But his entire tenure in Kathmandu is defined by that single word, bulldozer.
And originally that was meant very literally.
Oh, very literally. It was about physical bulldozers, knocking down illegal boundary walls, physically clearing out encroachments over the Takucha River, ripping up illegal parking lots.
It was incredibly physical and visible. It was all about aggressively reclaiming public space.
Yeah. But what's interesting in this 2026 manifesto is how he is actively reframing the bulldozer from a physical machine into a national metaphor.
The text calls it a digital bulldozer.
Yes. He is telling voters that he wants to take that exact same force, that uncompromising, relentless energy he used on illegal walls, and apply it to clear out the middlemen and the syndicates that are actively blocking the national economy.
So just to be clear, instead of knocking down a brick wall on a local sidewalk, he's talking about knocking down an invisible layer of bureaucracy that stops, say, a rural farmer from getting a fair market price.
That is exactly the pitch. He's basically saying, look, I proved I could clean up the physical streets. Now give me the power to clean up the invisible system.
But of course, anytime we talk about his mayoral legacy, we absolutely have to address the controversies, because it wasn't all just cheering crowds.
No. Not at all. The biggest and most consistent criticism against him has always been regarding the street vendors.
Right. There was massive pushback that his administration was being incredibly high-handed and cruel to the urban poor. violently removing vendors who are just trying to scrape by and survive on the streets.
It's a very tough look for someone who claims to be a man of the youth and the people.
Exactly. So how does he actually defend that in this manifesto? Because he can't just ignore it.
He doesn't ignore it. The text dives right into his core philosophy on this, which is that poverty management is fundamentally different from poverty alleviation.
Poverty management versus poverty alleviation.
Right. His quote in the text is, "Dignity isn't selling cheap goods on a dusty sidewalk." He essentially argues that allowing people to subsist in the informal street economy is just the state romanticizing poverty instead of fixing it.
So what's his alternative? He wants them in organized kiosks.
Well, eventually. But the bigger picture is what he calls moving toward a production economy. His specific stated goal in the manifesto is that Nepali youth should be working inside manufacturing factories with a guaranteed 25,000 NPR minimum wage, not sitting on the pavement selling imported plastic goods from foreign countries.
So he is basically outright rejecting the informal economy as a valid way of life.
Entirely. He views the informal street economy as a poverty trap that the state has lazily accepted. He wants to force formalization. It's a very harsh love approach.
I won't let you work on the street because I want to build a factory for you.
Exactly. But the obvious massive risk there is the timeline. There is a brutal gap of time between when you forcefully remove a street vendor's cart and when that hypothetical factory is actually built and hiring.
And in that gap, people get really hungry.
Exactly. That transition period is incredibly painful, and that's where the heaviest criticism of his model lies.
Right. But moving beyond just the bulldozers, the text also talks extensively about the Kathmandu model and how he plans to scale it.
Yes. He points to some of his less controversial, more administrative wins in Kathmandu as proof of concept.
Like the education policies, the source mentions the 10% scholarship mandates he forced upon private schools in the valley.
And the establishment of free basic health clinics at the ward level.
So his national pitch is to take those specific valley programs and deploy them nationwide.
That's the core of his brand of what you might call pragmatic socialism. The manifesto outlines a vision where the state rigidly guarantees what he calls the basics.
Meaning health and education.
Right. The state guarantees health and education completely so that the private sector is freed up to focus entirely on innovation and business without having to worry about their employees' basic survival needs.
Okay, that sounds fantastic on paper. Everyone loves guaranteed health and education. But the immediate question any skeptical voter is going to ask is, how on earth do you fund a massive welfare state expansion in a country with our GDP?
And he has a very specific answer for that in the text. He claims he can fund all of this simply by stopping the 40% leakage in the national development budget.
Wait, 40%?
That is the specific figure cited in the manifesto. He firmly believes that nearly half of the entire national development budget is currently lost to outright corruption, incredibly bad contracting, ghost projects, and general systemic inefficiency.
So he's saying we don't even need to raise massive new taxes. We just need to stop the bleeding.
Exactly. He argues that if he can plug that 40% hole, the money to fund national health and education is already sitting right there in the Treasury.
It's that engineer's mindset coming out again. He looks at the government and says, the system isn't broken because we lack fuel. It's broken because the pipes are leaking everywhere.
That's precisely it. Fix the pipes before you try to pour more water into the tank.
All right, now I think we really need to shift gears a bit. We've talked deeply about the structural politics and his economic theories, but to really understand this document, we need to talk about the emotion.
The anger.
Yeah, the deep, visceral anger that is clearly motivating this entire 2026 run.
Which brings us to segment 4 of the source material, the Gen Z uprising.
Yeah, this part of the deep dive it's really heavy. The source material continually refers back to this event it calls the September 2025 uprising.
And it was an absolute turning point for the nation. The text makes it clear that we literally cannot understand the tense political atmosphere of February 2026 without first understanding the trauma of September 2025.
Because the sources clearly mentioned that there were 76 to 77 deaths during those protests.
Which is just a staggering, heartbreaking loss of young life. It functioned as a massive national trauma.
And reading this, it feels like Balen has positioned himself as almost the avenger of that specific youth movement.
The avenger might actually be the most accurate word for it, because he explicitly calls for the formation of a high-level judicial commission on day 1 of his premiership.
Day 1, not week 2, not month 3.
Day 1. There is no waiting around. And his stated target for this commission is laser-focused. He wants to legally investigate and prosecute the specific government officials who issued the shoot-on-sight orders during those protests.
The quote in the text is chilling. He says, "There will be no political compromise on blood."
It's a direct, incredibly aggressive shot at the old guard's historical tendency to, form these toothless committees that ultimately do nothing, or to cut backroom deals to protect their own party cadres from prison.
Right, the usual sweep it under the rug tactic.
Exactly. But Balen is drawing a hard line. He is saying, if you sat in a room and ordered live ammunition fired at protesting students, you are going to federal prison. It is definitely a promise of retributive justice, but he frames it in the text as an absolute prerequisite for national healing.
And the manifesto draws a direct line between that political violence and the ongoing brain drain crisis, doesn't it?
Intimately.
Yeah.
He asked the foundational question, why were all those young people out on the streets protesting in the first place?
Right.
And his answer is that they felt they had absolutely no future left in this country.
The source brings up this really evocative visual of Tribhuvan International Airport. And honestly, it is heartbreaking. Thousands of young people, the brightest minds of a generation, physically leaving the country every single day.
It's not just emigration, it's an exodus. And Balen's diagnosis of why this is happening is quite profound. He states that the youth leave because what he calls the cost of dreaming in Nepal has simply become too high.
The cost of dreaming, that is quite a phrase.
Think about what it means in practical terms. To start a small business, to buy a modest house, to just exist and try to move up the ladder, the bureaucratic and corrupt barriers are so massive that it crushes any hope.
So his platform proposes some very specific solutions to dramatically lower that cost.
Yes, and he frames it all in terms of ROI, return on investment for the country.
And it starts with tackling the culture, right?
Right. He states a goal of totally replacing aftermanchi, which is that deeply ingrained culture of who you know getting all the opportunities.
Nepotism.
Nepotism, yeah. Replacing that entirely with pure merit, meaning what you know is the only thing that matters.
Which is easier said than done, but he does list specific policies to back it up.
He does. One of the big ones is introducing digital nomad visas, specifically aimed at Nepali youth.
Wait, how does a nomad visa work for a citizen?
Well, it's about regulatory framework. It's about legally allowing and encouraging young Nepalese to remotely work for massive global companies, earning foreign currency, while physically living and spending that money inside Nepal without being taxed to death or harassed by outdated banking laws.
Ah, I see. And then there are the startup loans mentioned in the text.
Right. He is proposing up to 2 million MPR in startup capital for youth entrepreneurs. And crucially, it's interest-free.
Interest-free. That's a massive state subsidy.
It is. But his economic bet, as explained in the manifesto, is that if the state gives a smart kid 2 million rupees and a laptop, that kid is going to eventually generate vastly more value for the domestic economy over their lifetime than if the state just ignores them and they get shipped off to do manual labor in the Gulf.
It's treating human capital as an actual investment rather than an export commodity.
Exactly. It's born of utter desperation. His implicit argument is that if the government doesn't do this immediately, there literally won't be a working-age population left here to govern in a decade.
Wow. Okay, so that perfectly sets the stage for the how. How does he actually plan to execute all of this? Which brings us to segment 5, the famous 100-day action plan.
The structural reset.
And folks listening, let me assure you, the source material here is wildly detailed. This isn't just a generic political promise of we will make things better. This is a literal day-by-day checklist.
He divides the 100 days into 3 very distinct, aggressive phases.
Let's start breaking them down. Phase 1, this covers days 1 to 30. He titles it Audit and Justice.
And this is, without a doubt, the most aggressive phase. The centerpiece here is what he's calling the Great Audit.
Okay, what is the Great Audit?
He is proposing to launch a massive retrospective probe into the personal assets of every single public official who has held office since 1990.
Since 1990, that's over 35 years. That covers basically everybody in the modern political era.
Every single one of them. The entire political and bureaucratic class. And the legal mechanism he wants to use here is the absolute key to understanding how disruptive this is. He wants to institute a reversed burden of proof.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that concept to me. How does a reversed burden of proof work?
Okay, so in a normal traditional legal system, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you actively stole the money.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Balen wants to legally flip that entirely for public servants. Under his plan, If you are a government official whose official salary is, say, 50,000 MPR a month, but somehow you own a massive shopping mall in Kathmandu, you now have to legally prove exactly where you got the money to buy it.
Oh, wow.
And if you cannot provide a legitimate, documented source of income for those assets, the state automatically assumes it's corrupt wealth and confiscates it.
That would cause absolute panic in the power corridors of Kathmandu.
It would be a political earthquake.
Yeah.
He is openly threatening to confiscate the generational wealth of some of the most powerful people in the country.
That is wild. And alongside that, phase one includes this concept of the glass box cabinet.
Right, which is aimed at changing how governance happens day to day. He wants to live stream all cabinet meetings.
Live, as in broadcast on YouTube while they are arguing about policy.
Exactly. On all major social media platforms, the stated goal in the manifesto is to permanently end the Bugbanda.
The culture of secret deal-making.
Yeah, exactly. Historically, major national decisions aren't made in Parliament. They're agreed upon by party bosses behind closed doors. You give my guy this massive construction contract, and I'll give your guy this ambassador appointment.
Right. Quid pro quo.
Balen wants to completely destroy that by forcing them to do it all in front of a live camera.
Honestly, it sounds like it would be absolute chaos.
Oh, it might be totally dysfunctional at first. But his argument is that it would finally undeniably be transparent.
And phase one wraps up with a very symbolic action regarding government vehicles.
Yes, he plans to publicly auction off over 500 luxury government vehicles, specifically targeting the Pajeros.
The Pajero, the ultimate symbol of political status in Nepal.
Right. He wants to sell them all off and take that cash to seed the Gen Z Innovation Fund we talked about earlier.
It's pure optics, sure.
It is entirely optics, but it sends a massive, undeniable message to the public. The era of taxpayer-funded luxury for leaders is dead.
Okay, so that's just the first month. Moving right along to phase two. This covers days 31 to 60. The manifesto calls this digital and economic jumpstart.
Because after spending the first 30 days punishing the corruptors, he knows he has to immediately try to get the actual economy moving, or he'll lose the public's goodwill.
Right. And he focuses heavily on youth tech here. The first bullet point is guaranteeing 10 gigabits of monthly free data for all citizens aged 18 to 28.
Because he views internet connectivity as a fundamental right in the modern world. His logic is simple. If you want to build a thriving digital economy, your workforce actually needs to be online without going bankrupt.
Makes total sense. But what really caught my eye in phase two is this $10,000 business card initiative. What exactly is that solving?
Oh, this is a huge, huge deal for the freelance and tech community. Right now, because of strict national currency controls, it is incredibly difficult for a Nepali citizen to legitimately pay for things internationally.
Because the money isn't allowed to easily leave the country.
Exactly. So if you are a young Nepali developer and you need to buy specialized software or pay for cloud hosting servers or even just by advertising on Facebook to reach a global audience, you are constantly blocked by these archaic restrictions.
It strangles small tech businesses before they can even start.
Right. So Balen's policy here is to issue freelancers and registered startups a pre-approved specialized banking card that allows them to seamlessly spend up to $10,000 internationally without needing special government permission every single time.
That would just unlock so much immediate potential.
It totally removes the friction. It finally allows Nepali tech talent to actually compete on a global playing field.
Now, phase two also explicitly mentions tackling the cooperatives crisis.
Which is a massive, ongoing financial scandal hurting working-class people.
Right. The manifesto says he plans on recovering small savers' money.
By aggressively seizing the personal assets of the corrupt cooperative chairman who absconded with the funds. Again, it leans heavily on that aggressive asset seizure strategy from phase one, but this time using it to directly pay back the poor citizens who were robbed.
And regarding migrant workers, he has a very specific policy in phase two as well.
Yes, a 5,000 NPR monthly honor bonus.
An honor bonus for what?
For any migrant worker who sends their remittances back home exclusively through formal legal banking channels.
Ah, I see. He's trying to actively kill the Hundi system.
Exactly. The Hundi system is an informal, technically illegal money transfer network that bypasses the government and starves the national treasury of foreign reserves.
Because right now, Hundi often offers a slightly better exchange rate, so workers use it.
Right. So Balen's approach is smart. He's saying, don't just pass a law banning the illegal way, use state funds to make the legal way actively more profitable for the worker.
Carrots instead of sticks. Okay, let's dive into phase 3. This is days 61 to 100, structural reconstruction.
This is where he attempts the really heavy systemic lifting that usually takes years. First up is university reform.
Sacking the VCs?
Yes, specifically targeting the political appointees at Trevivan University and other major institutions. He is promising to outright fire them all
And replace them with who?
with strictly merit-based academics. The source notes his deep frustration that Nepali universities have basically functioned as political playgrounds and recruitment centers for the major parties for way too long.
He wants to depoliticize higher education entirely.
That's the goal. But the next point in phase 3 is going to be incredibly controversial: federalism reform.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one. The text says he wants to replace the provincial assemblies with a council of mayors. Wait, does that mean he wants to entirely get rid of the provinces?
No, not the geographic province itself. He wants to eliminate the massively bloated political assembly that sits on top of it.
The expensive provincial MPs.
Exactly. He argues in the manifesto that a streamlined council made up of the already elected local mayors can easily manage the provincial budget and administration.
And the financial benefit of that.
He claims this specific administrative cut would reduce the operating costs of the federal system by a staggering 60%.
60%. But look, that policy is going to face absolutely massive, perhaps violent resistance from the established political parties.
Oh, without a doubt, because those provincial assembly seats, that is exactly where the big parties park their loyal cadres to give them a salary and status.
Right.
Balen is basically trying to permanently pave over their favorite political parking lot. They will fight him to the death on it.
Okay, moving to the agricultural sector in phase 3, he mentioned something called cool chain infrastructure.
Yes, specifically building out state-subsidized solar cold storage facilities for rural farmers.
Okay, that sounds like a nice development project, but why is it listed under major structural reform?
Because of how agricultural syndicates currently hold power. Right now, a rural farmer harvests their tomatoes, and they have to sell them to the middleman that exact same day, no matter how terribly low the price is.
Because otherwise the tomatoes rot in the heat and they get nothing.
Exactly. The farmer has zero negotiating power. But if the government provides accessible cold storage, that farmer can put their crop on ice and literally wait out the market for a fair price.
Oh, wow. It completely breaks the monopolistic grip of the middleman syndicates.
It gives the primary producer the one thing they currently lack:
Where?
leverage. And in economics, leverage is absolutely everything.
That is surprisingly elegant. And finally, phase 3 closes with a major legal initiative, the whistleblower law.
Yes, and this is fascinating. He proposes a law that legally rewards any citizen with a flat 10% cut of all recovered state money if they successfully report a case of corruption.
That essentially turns every single citizen in the country into a highly motivated, freelance anti-corruption watchdog.
It gamifies anti-corruption. Think about the incentive structure. If you are a mid-level bureaucrat and you see your boss stealing 1 million rupees from a bridge project.
And you report him with proof, the state cuts you a check for 100,000 rupees.
Exactly. It completely shatters the culture of silent complicity because the financial reward for speaking up is suddenly life-changing. It is a brilliant and frankly terrifying concept for anyone currently taking bribes.
Okay, so that is the 100-day plan, but let's zoom out a bit as we get toward the end here. Segment 6 focuses on foreign policy, because obviously you cannot run a country like Nepal without constantly dealing with the massive neighbors on your borders.
Right. The manifesto titles this section "The New Nationalism."
And it seems he really wants to aggressively reframe the country's geopolitics. He explicitly rejects the historical idea of Nepal as a buffer state.
Yes, because the word buffer implies that Nepal is just a passive cushion sitting between two aggressive giants, India and China. It implies weakness. Balen wants to firmly rebrand Nepal as a bridge.
A bridge is active, it's connective.
Exactly. And the guiding policy slogan he uses throughout this section is simply Nepal first.
Okay, so what does Nepal first look like in practice when dealing with India?
The text highlights a shift from emotional diplomacy to technical diplomacy. When discussing border issues or the delayed EPG report, he insists on relying strictly on hard data, historical mapping, and legal texts, rather than just whipping up emotional anti-India rhetoric for cheap votes.
A very technocratic approach to border disputes. And what about dealing with China?
Regarding China, the focus remains firmly on the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. He wants to prioritize hard connectivity projects like roads and transmission lines, and the manifesto emphasizes this heavily, with incredibly strict sovereign debt limits. He is acutely, very publicly wary of falling into a sovereign debt trap.
So he's saying we desperately want the new roads to the north, but we absolutely refuse to mortgage the sovereignty of the country to pay for them.
Precisely. It's a very cautious, calculated engagement.
The energy pivot mentioned in the foreign policy section is really interesting to me, too.
Oh, it's central to his entire long-term economic vision. He wants to fundamentally transition Nepal from being a labor-exporting nation into a hydropower exporting hub.
Right now, we send our young men to build stadiums in Qatar. He wants to instead send raw electricity down to power factories in India.
Exactly. The stated goal in the text is to achieve a massive 5,000 megawatt power export capacity to India and Bangladesh by the year 2028.
And he plans to do that through fast-track PPAs.
Yes, power purchase agreements.
Yeah.
He essentially views the raging Himalayan rivers as the untapped oil reserves of Nepal. If he can get the bureaucracy out of the way, the water alone can fund the state.
It really is, when you step back and look at it all together, an absolute, complete reimagining of what the state's fundamental function is.
It is. He is entirely treating the governance of the country like a massive, complex engineering project. It's all about ruthlessly optimizing inputs and maximizing outputs.
So as we start to wrap this deep dive up, let's take a final look at the persona holding all of this together, the winning persona, as the outline calls it.
Right. Because Balen has clearly, carefully evolved. He is no longer just the old Balen.
The guy who just loudly criticized the system from the outside.
Exactly. He has intentionally transitioned into candidate Balen, the architect who claims he actually has the blueprints to fix it.
But through it all, he still wears the signature black glasses.
He does. And the manifesto actually addresses this directly, which I thought was a nice touch.
What does it say?
It says the glasses aren't a shield, and they aren't a hiding spot to avoid looking at people. He claims they are a deliberate symbol of seeing the world clearly without distraction.
It's just incredible branding. It projects this stoic, totally unreadable, hyper-focused leader vibe.
Very modern political theater.
Now, the outro of the manifesto brings up this really fascinating concept, the Day 100 Town Hall.
Yeah. This is how he promises to end his first phase of governance. He puts it in writing that on day 100, he will stand physically at Tundikil, the massive open ground right in the center of Kathmandu.
And do what?
And conduct a relentless, line-by-line public audit of his own manifesto in front of the crowds.
Wow.
He says he will go through the list. I promised you this specific thing on day 14. Did my government do it? Yes or no?
I mean, politically speaking, that is astronomically high risk.
High risk, but incredibly high reward if he actually pulls it off. It sets a terrifying, unmovable deadline for his own bureaucracy to perform.
So after going through all of this, all the policies, the bulldozers, the audits, here is the final provocative thought we want to leave you, the listener, with today.
The big question.
We have this incredibly rigid, logical engineer's mindset. Clear structural plans, cold calculations, and he is attempting to forcefully apply this mindset to a deeply messy, historically chaotic, and wildly emotional democracy.
So the ultimate question for 2026 is this. Does his machine finally break the corruption? Or does the deeply entrenched corruption ultimately break his machine?
Can you truly engineer a political revolution from the top down?
I guess we are all about to find out very shortly.
Balen's final closing phrase in the manifesto really sets the tone. He writes, La Sharanam.
Shame. Shame to the old era.
Right. Shame to the old era, and welcome to the era of competence.
It is an incredibly bold claim to make in a country that has seen so many broken promises.
It certainly is. February 2026, folks. Keep your eyes firmly fixed on Jhapa 5. Keep your eyes on what the RSP is doing, because whatever happens next, this is going to be an absolutely wild ride for the country.
Indeed it is.
Thanks for diving deep into the sources with us today.
It was a pleasure unpacking it all.
See you all in the next deep dive.